Have you ever wondered how someone can swear you mean everything to them, and then disappear without a trace? 1 minute you're building something, laughing at 2 a.m. texts, sharing thoughts you've never told anyone else, maybe even imagining a future together. Then suddenly it's silence. No argument. No explanation. Just absence. It feels like being erased. And let's be honest, your first instinct is to blame yourself. You question your worth. You wonder, what did I miss? What did I do? But here's the trap, and it's one most people fall into. We think closure is something someone else gives us. That we need answers to move on. That we have to understand their silence in order to heal ours. That's a lie. One of the most common and brutal myths in modern relationships is this: that being ghosted is proof you weren't enough. But what if it wasn't about you at all? What if their silence was never rejection, but revelation? What if it was the very spark that sets your evolution on fire? You see, too many men spiral after ghosting because they've been taught that their value comes from being chosen. But when you start operating from stoic strength, from inner clarity, you realize something profound. Not everyone who exits your life was ever qualified to stay. The pain they caused? That wasn't punishment. That was your wake-up call. And today, we're going to flip that pain into power. In this video, I'm not just going to help you get over someone. I'm going to help you transform. From confusion to clarity. From heartbreak to high ground. From ghosted to legendary. We'll dismantle the myths that keep you stuck, and I'll show you why her silence was the exact thing you needed to reclaim your life, your focus, your self-respect. This isn't about getting her back. It's about getting yourself back, sharper, stronger, and more grounded than you've ever been. Because when you stop chasing what left, and start becoming what stays. The man of purpose, of presence, of stoic relationships, you become unforgettable. That's not hype. That's transformation. And if you stick around until the end, you'll learn how to use what broke you to build a version of yourself so powerful, so centered, that even her memory can't touch it. Ready? Let's begin. 1. Kill the fantasy, respect reality. You didn't fall in love with her, you fell in love with the version of her that lived in your mind. Let that sink in. What you missed, what you mourned, wasn't the full truth of who she was. It was the highlight reel, the curated chemistry, the illusion dressed up as destiny. And that's what stings the most, isn't it? That you didn't just lose her. You lost the story you were writing in your head. The one where she stayed. Where it made sense. Where you mattered in the way you thought you did. But that version? It never existed. Not fully. That's the hardest part to swallow when someone ghosts you, because ghosting doesn't just leave a silence, it leaves a gap your imagination rushes to fill. You replay the good moments, the laughter, the little gestures. You remember how she looked at you like you were rare. And now, that look is gone. So your mind clings to what was, or what you thought was, and starts building a fantasy from fragments. That fantasy becomes your prison. And breaking free starts here, by killing the fantasy and facing reality head-on. The woman who ghosted you wasn't your soulmate. She was a mirror. Not a partner, but a reflection of your own unmet needs, unresolved insecurities, and your hunger for validation. And if that sounds harsh, good. It's meant to be. Because a man doesn't grow from comfort. He grows from confrontation, especially the kind that happens in silence. Think about it. If she were truly the right person, would she have vanished without a word? If what you had was real, would it have ended in shadows instead of conversation? You're not just grieving a relationship, you're grieving the collapse of a false construct. You projected your ideals, your hopes, your future onto someone who never earned that weight. And that's not love. That's attachment. It's fantasy. And fantasies, no matter how beautiful, must die for the truth to live. You might be thinking, but it felt real. Of course it did. That's what fantasies do. They mimic reality just enough to feel true. You shared moments. You had chemistry. You had connection. But so what? Chemistry isn't character. And consistency is what defines connection, not intensity. She may have lit a spark in you, but a spark doesn't build a fire unless it's fed. She didn't feed it. She let it die. And her silence, her ghosting, wasn't a mistake. It was a message. She showed you who she was. The question is, are you brave enough to believe it? This is where Stoicism steps in. You see, Stoicism isn't about numbing out or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about facing the wound without illusion. It's about asking, what's true? And cutting away everything that isn't. So here's the truth. Someone who disappears without explanation is not someone who values emotional responsibility. That's not strength. That's avoidance. And that avoidance has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their fear. Stoic relationships are built on clarity, on accountability, on shared values, not on intense highs and ghosted lows. You weren't ghosted by a queen. You were ghosted by someone who couldn't even say goodbye. That's not mystery. That's immaturity. And yet, most men cling to the fantasy because it gives them hope. Hope that maybe she'll come back. That maybe she's just confused. That maybe this is temporary. Let me be clear. If someone values you, you'll never have to guess how they feel. Confusion is not a sign of depth. It's a sign of dysfunction. Hope is dangerous when it's tied to denial. The longer you feed the fantasy, the longer you delay your evolution. So ask yourself, what are you really holding on to? Is it her? Or is it the version of you who believed he needed her? Because that version of you, the one who tied his self-worth to her presence, is the version you must bury. He's the boy who waited for text bubbles, who refreshed her feed looking for meaning, who checked his phone first thing in the morning hoping for a hey. That boy cannot build the life you're capable of living. And I say, boy, not to insult, but to awaken. A man doesn't beg for attention. He doesn't build castles on quicksand. He respects what is, not what could have been. And what is this she left? No explanation. No effort. No closure. That's the truth. And when you stop fighting it, you start freeing yourself. Freedom begins when you stop romanticizing the people who hurt you. When you stop confusing chemistry for compatibility. When you stop assigning meaning to someone's silence and start finding it in your own. Her absence isn't a riddle to solve. It's a door to walk through. And on the other side of that door is the man who doesn't need answers, he creates them. The man who doesn't live in reaction, but in reflection. The man who builds instead of begs. That man isn't chasing ghosts. He's chasing greatness. And the path to that begins by killing every lie you told yourself about her. This is the internal shift, where Stoicism becomes more than an idea and starts becoming a code. A lens through which you see yourself and others clearly. You stop expecting emotional maturity from those who haven't earned it. You stop projecting your values onto people who don't share them. You stop interpreting silence as depth, and start seeing it for what it often is, disinterest, dysfunction, or both. You stop creating narratives around why she left, and start building a life so grounded that no one's exit can shake you. You stop needing the past to be different, and start demanding more from your future. You begin to realize something else. Closure isn't something you're owed. It's something you give yourself. By accepting reality. By detaching from illusion. By letting go of what was never real to make space for what can actually grow. This isn't just emotional healing. This is psychological recalibration. And it's rare, because most men stay stuck in the fantasy, afraid that if they let go of her, they'll lose the part of themselves that felt alive with her. But real aliveness doesn't come from another person. It comes from purpose. From peace. From becoming whole on your own terms. So I ask you now, what's the story you've been telling yourself? That she was the one? That you lost your chance? That something must be wrong with you if she left? Or are you ready to tell a different story? One that starts not with her vanishing, but with you awakening. One where her ghosting wasn't the end, but the ignition switch. One where stoic relationships become your standard, not emotional roller coasters. One where pain becomes clarity, not chaos. If you're brave enough to tell that story, you won't just move on. You'll rise. Because the truth is, legends are never built on fantasy. They're built on reality, owned, accepted, and faced without flinching. Her leaving was your chance to see clearly. And clarity is power. When you stop needing her to come back, you start coming back to yourself. Stronger. Sharper. Stoic. That's where your legend begins. And it begins with killing the fantasy. 2. Ego death was the door. When she vanished, something else disappeared with her, and it wasn't just the relationship. It was your illusion of control. The belief that if you said the right things, did the right things, loved hard enough, stayed consistent enough, you could keep her. That belief shattered the moment she left without warning, and in its place, a painful silence settled. Not just in your phone, but in your identity. Because the version of you that existed with her, that depended on her for reassurance, for consistency, for identity, died. And as brutal as that sounds, it was necessary. Because ego death, though agonizing, is the beginning of all true growth. Let's break it down. The ego doesn't want to be exposed. It doesn't want to face rejection. It certainly doesn't want to admit that its power was tied to someone else's presence. But the truth is, if someone ghosting you can shake your foundation, that foundation wasn't solid to begin with. Most people think ego is just arrogance, pride, or vanity. But in reality, ego is also attachment. It's the clinging to how things should have gone, how someone should have treated you, how the story should have ended. And when that doesn't happen, when you're ghosted, discarded, left unread, the ego panics. It doesn't know how to function without the narrative it built. You grieve, not just the person, but the version of yourself that you were with them. You miss the comfort of who you thought you were in their eyes. Maybe you thought you were strong because she admired you. Maybe you thought you were calm because she was responsive. But then she disappeared, and suddenly, that strength cracked. That calm turned to obsession. That certainty collapsed into doubt. That's ego death. It doesn't come gently. It doesn't whisper. It breaks you wide open, and in that breaking, you either spiral or you sharpen. But Stoicism offers another path. A path most never see because they're too busy trying to get back what's already gone. You don't resist the death. You don't chase shadows of who you were. You look it in the eye and say, "Good. Now I can become real." Because who you thought you were was still a version of you shaped by needing something outside yourself to feel whole. And that's the trap that ghosting reveals. You weren't abandoned. You were exposed. You were shown the parts of you that still relied on external validation, external affection, external consistency. And that exposure? It's a gift. Not wrapped in comfort, but in clarity. This is where the Stoic path truly begins. Not with pretending it didn't hurt, but with letting it burn. Letting it peel back the false layers until you're face to face with the raw, unfiltered you. The one who now has to stand without her. The one who has to learn to breathe without waiting for a notification. The one who realizes that presence isn't proven by who stays. It's earned by who you become. This pain doesn't end you. It introduces you to the man who was buried beneath comfort, distraction, and dependence. Think about it. What if she had never ghosted you? What if she had lingered? Given you breadcrumbs? Played hot and cold for weeks or months? You would have stayed. You would have twisted yourself into shapes to earn back her attention. You would have settled for less than what you deserved just to keep the illusion alive. Her ghosting, though cruel on the surface, was a clean break. It was the universe pulling the rug out from under a version of you that wasn't built to last. And that sting, that collapse? That's your ego being starved of everything it clung to. It hurts, but it also heals. Because once it dies, what remains is truth. And the truth is powerful. The truth is you are not defined by who walks away from you. You are not built on the foundation of someone else's presence. You are forged in solitude, in silence, in stillness. The truth is, you don't need her to explain anything to become whole again. You just need to stop running from the silence she left and start listening to what it's teaching you. The pain you feel right now isn't weakness. It's the shedding of illusion. It's your old self crumbling so your higher self can emerge. This moment, right now, is the line between two versions of you. The man who chased, obsessed, and doubted, and the man who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. Not because he's bitter, but because he's better. Not better than her, better than who he used to be. The pain was the process. The rejection was the refinement. You don't chase now because you've stepped into something more powerful than revenge. You've stepped into reinvention. And reinvention doesn't begin when things feel good. It begins when you hit the floor and realize the only way forward is up, alone, intentional, grounded. You start building without needing an audience. You stop looking at your phone for comfort and start looking in the mirror for accountability. You stop asking, "Why did she leave?" and start asking, "Why did I tolerate inconsistency for so long?" That question is where freedom lives. That question is the turning point. Because when the ego dies, the man begins. Most men never make it here. They cling to the pain. They replay the fantasy. They look for signs, for breadcrumbs, for closure. And because they can't let go of the version of themselves who needed her, they never meet the version who doesn't. Don't let that be you. Stand in the fire. Let it burn what's not real. Let it reveal the blueprint for a man who builds without needing applause. Let Stoicism guide you, not into cold detachment, but into focused evolution. You're not rejecting emotion. You're mastering it. You're not running from pain. You're rising through it. And you'll know you've passed through the fire when you stop waiting for her to notice. When her silence no longer echoes in your chest. When your peace becomes louder than your pain. That's not numbness. That's progress. That's the reward for walking through the valley without folding. You weren't meant to stay broken. You were meant to break open. To rebuild, to reframe, to reclaim. That's how Stoic relationships are formed, not through attachment, but through alignment. Through shared values, not emotional volatility. Because here's the deeper truth, a man who survives ego death becomes untouchable, not because he's hardened, but because he's healed. He no longer needs to be chosen to feel worthy. He no longer compromises who he is to be liked. His value is intrinsic, not conditional. And from that place, everything changes. Your standards rise. Your focus sharpens. Your presence deepens. You become magnetic, not because you try, but because you no longer need anything from anyone. And yes, she might notice. She might return, might text, might orbit. But by then, the shift will be complete. You'll feel no urge to respond. Not because you're angry, but because you're clear. That version of you who would have replied instantly, who would have begged for closure, he's gone. Replaced by a man who no longer builds his life around ghosts. Who no longer fears silence, because silence is now his sanctuary. That man is you. So if you've felt the sting of her absence, the ache of ghosting, the confusion of not knowing why, know this, you're in the storm. But this storm isn't here to destroy you. It's here to reintroduce you to the man you were always meant to be. One who stands alone, strong and unshakable. The pain isn't the end of your story. It's the start of your legacy. And if this part of the journey is hitting you right where it should, if you're feeling the fire but finally seeing the path, it's time to own it. Like and comment, number 1, if this message speaks to your soul, and make sure you subscribe. Because this is just the beginning. And you don't rise into legend by accident, you rise by design. Let's keep going. 3. Stillness is mastery. The world tells you to react, to speak, to respond, to defend yourself, to explain, to show that you care. But a man on the Stoic path knows something deeper. Real strength doesn't shout. It doesn't panic. It doesn't beg for recognition. Real strength becomes still. When she ghosted you, she expected a reaction. Most do. A message, an argument, a desperate attempt to fix what she silently destroyed. But your silence? That wasn't weakness. That was power choosing not to perform. That was the storm choosing to stay inside until it could be directed with precision. That was you finally understanding that the loudest answer you'll ever give is no answer at all. Stillness isn't apathy. It's awareness without chaos. It's emotional control so rare in this world that people confuse it for indifference. But stillness, in its purest form, is the edge that separates the man who moves from emotion from the man who leads with intention. When she left, she created a vacuum. A space. And most men fill that space with noise, long texts, petty posts, venting to anyone who'll listen. Why? Because they're uncomfortable with silence. Because they've never been taught that in the absence of noise, your presence can speak volumes. A Stoic man, though, he knows better. He uses that silence as a mirror, not a megaphone. He observes. He calibrates. He sharpens. Imagine this, she's scrolling late at night. Maybe curiosity got the better of her. Maybe she just wants to see if you're still wrapped around her finger. But instead of finding posts or stories aimed at her, she finds nothing. No clues. No attention seeking. No emotional leaks. Just stillness. That's the moment she starts questioning her power. Because what she expected was chaos. And what she got instead was calm. That calm, your stillness, isn't a lack of pain. It's the presence of strength. It's restraint, not repression. It's what happens when a man no longer allows other people to decide the tempo of his emotions. Stillness requires discipline. When everything in you wants to reach out, to clarify, to scream for justice, but you don't. When your mind races with what ifs and why nows and how could she, but you let them pass like clouds, not storms. When your friends say, "Just message her, man," and you nod but stay silent. That's not you being passive. That's you training. Training to respond less and reflect more. Training to act from a place of principle, not panic. That is stoicism in motion. And it's what separates men who stay wounded from those who become warriors. Think of every moment you chose not to speak. Every text you didn't send. Every argument you didn't engage in. That wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. The kind most men never develop because they're too afraid of the emptiness. But here's the secret, the emptiness isn't your enemy. It's your ally. It gives you space to rebuild, to reassess, to evolve. Stillness is the pause between who you were and who you're becoming. It's where your power accumulates, not in noise but in precision. You don't need to shout when your energy is aligned. You don't need to perform when your identity is rooted. This is especially true in Stoic relationships. If you ever hope to build one in the future, this stillness will be your foundation. Because in true connection, peace is louder than performance. Clarity is stronger than charisma. If you can master the silence she left you with, you'll never again settle for chaos disguised as passion. You'll know how to be alone without being lonely. You'll know how to hold space for discomfort without collapsing under it. That's the kind of man who becomes rare, not just to women, but to the world. Let's talk about the power dynamic she didn't expect. She thought disappearing would control the narrative. That silence would keep you hooked, wondering, chasing. But your stillness flipped the script. Instead of being predictable, you became unreadable. Instead of needing answers, you became the answer. And in doing so, you reclaimed what most give away after a breakup, sovereignty. The quiet, internal authority that says, "I define myself now. I write this story. I choose when and how I speak." That is mastery. And mastery is magnetic. Stillness also gives birth to clarity. In the quiet, you begin to hear yourself again, not the insecure voice seeking approval, but the deeper voice asking, "What do I want now? What will I no longer tolerate? What does alignment look like, not just in relationships, but in every part of my life?" These aren't questions you can hear when you're screaming for closure. These are the questions that rise only when you sit with the silence. When you stop trying to escape it and start honoring it. Because stillness doesn't just heal. It reveals. And the truth is, if she truly had the maturity and emotional depth you believed she did, she would have communicated, honestly, clearly, respectfully. But she didn't. And in that space she left, you found a deeper version of yourself. One who doesn't reach. One who doesn't justify. One who doesn't engage with energy that abandons responsibility. That kind of self-control? It radiates. It shifts everything. And even if she never sees it, even if she never returns, you'll know. You'll feel the difference in how you walk, speak, move, and think. That's the reward of stillness. It doesn't give you closure. It gives you evolution. Stillness also teaches one of the hardest and most important lessons in Stoicism. You don't owe anyone access to your energy. Especially those who handled it carelessly. Just because someone once made you feel seen doesn't mean they earn a lifetime subscription to your soul. Silence becomes your boundary. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. And if she ever circles back, it won't be met with fury. It'll be met with clarity. You don't need to explain why you didn't chase. The silence was the explanation. The stillness was the statement. You outgrew the conversation. And let's be real, stillness doesn't always feel good at first. It's uncomfortable. It's unfamiliar. But that discomfort is where your edge sharpens. Every time you sit in the silence without breaking, you're building spiritual muscle. You're conditioning your mind not to react impulsively, not to seek temporary relief in long-term damage. You're developing the kind of poise that cannot be manipulated. That kind of poise is not just stoic. It's powerful. So ask yourself now, what has stillness taught you? What has it revealed about your patterns, your past, your standards? Has it shown you where you gave too much too quickly? Has it uncovered how easily you let fantasy override reality? These are the questions that elevate a man. Not, will she come back? But, what am I learning from her absence? Not, why did she ghost me? But, what did I ignore before she did? And once you start answering those questions honestly, you'll feel something new rising, peace. Not because she came back, but because you stopped waiting. Stillness is not about doing nothing. It's about doing the inner work so that everything you do from here forward is done from power, not pain. It's about choosing presence over pressure. It's about understanding that momentum doesn't always look like movement. Sometimes the most important growth happens in the quietest moments, when you're still, when you're grounded, when you're listening. To yourself, to life, to the man you're becoming. And let me be clear, this version of you, the one who can sit in silence, who can navigate discomfort without panicking, who can remain composed in emotional chaos, that man is rare. That man doesn't chase. He attracts. That man doesn't beg. He builds. That man doesn't fold under silence. He forges power within it. And in a world full of impulsive, reactive noise, stillness becomes your secret weapon. Remember, she didn't expect this. She didn't expect you to go quiet, to stay focused, to stop chasing. But that's the beauty of stillness. It doesn't announce the shift, it becomes it. You didn't need to post quotes. You didn't need to send long paragraphs. You just became someone she could no longer predict. And unpredictability, when grounded in discipline, becomes irresistible. Not because you wanted her back, but because you became unavailable to what once had power over you. In the end, the goal isn't to make her regret leaving. The goal is to become so centered, so composed, so self-possessed that her regret no longer affects your direction. Stillness is how you reclaim that path. It's how you stop reacting to the past and start leading into your future. And once you taste that kind of peace, you'll never trade it for temporary chaos again. This is how Stoicism plays out in real life. Not as philosophy on paper, but as power in practice. In your daily choices, in your discipline, in your energy. Stillness isn't just a phase. It's a position, a way of being. It's mastery. And you've just stepped into it. 4. Detachment made you dangerous. There's a moment after the ghosting, after the grief, after the spiral, when everything goes quiet. Not just around you, but within you. It's not numbness. It's not suppression. It's something sharper. You feel it first in the way you stop checking your phone. You no longer wait for the typing dots to appear. You stop watching her stories, stop scanning her social feed for hidden meaning. The obsession fades, not because you no longer care, but because you're evolving past the need to care like that. And in that quiet shift, detachment begins. Not the kind that runs from emotion, but the kind that no longer obeys it. That's when you become dangerous. Dangerous not in a destructive way, but in a focused, precise, composed way. Because when a man is no longer moved by the presence or absence of someone else, when he no longer builds his identity around whether or not he is chosen, he becomes free. That freedom? That's your power. And that's the exact opposite of what she expected. She thought her silence would keep you on a string, confused and off balance. She didn't plan for your detachment. She didn't calculate that her absence would sharpen you. She didn't expect to be forgotten by a man who used to overthink her every move. Detachment isn't pretending not to care. It's understanding exactly what deserves your care and what doesn't. That difference changes everything. It alters how you walk, how you speak, how you show up in every room. When you stop needing people to act a certain way to feel okay inside, you gain what most never find: emotional control. That's what detachment really is. Control over your internal world. And when your internal world is steady, no one can shake you from the outside. They lose the ability to trigger, to manipulate, to control. And when you can't be controlled, you become powerful beyond measure. Let's be clear, detachment doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. You still feel. You still remember. You might even still love. But you no longer let that love be a leash. You feel it, but you no longer fold under it. That's strength. That's stoicism. Stoicism isn't the absence of emotion, it's the mastery of it. It's standing in the storm and saying, "I am not my impulses." It's hearing the chaos in your head and choosing not to speak from it. It's remembering her touch and still keeping your hands to yourself. That discipline is magnetic. It's rare. It's threatening to people who thought they could always reach you. And now you're not reaching. You're retracting. Not to punish her, but to protect your energy. Because you've realized not everyone deserves access to your focus. Not everyone is safe to be vulnerable with. Especially not someone who could vanish without warning. Detachment gives you space. And in that space, you see everything clearer. You see that she wasn't consistent. That you overlooked red flags. That you bent your own boundaries just to feel close to someone who never planned to stay. The illusion is broken, and your clarity is born. You also begin to see the contrast. While she collects attention, you collect discipline. While she chases distractions, you chase excellence. You detach from her not just emotionally, but mentally. She becomes a blip in your mind instead of the center of it. Your focus sharpens. Your standards rise. And you start doing what very few men do after heartbreak. You rise without needing revenge. You elevate not to be seen, but to become someone no one can ghost again. Someone built so deeply in purpose that no loss can collapse him. And that's what makes you dangerous now. Not because you're out for payback, but because you no longer need to prove anything. When you detach, you stop performing. You stop trying to convince her, or anyone, that you were enough. You already are. And when a man moves from that place, everything changes. His energy becomes clean. His vision becomes clear. His circle becomes tighter. His mission becomes non-negotiable. And that shift? It's felt. Even if she doesn't say it, even if she never comes back, she feels it. She feels your absence like gravity. Because when you were invested, your presence was undeniable. Now, it's untouchable. Here's the twist most men never realize: detachment doesn't push her away. It pulls her curiosity in. When you stop chasing, she starts wondering. When you stop reacting, she starts noticing. When you stop validating, she starts questioning. Detachment flips the script. But that's not why you do it. You don't detach to attract. You detach to evolve. You become your own source of peace, your own compass, your own anchor. That's what makes you rare. That's what makes you legendary. And here's where Stoic relationships start to take root. You're no longer addicted to chemistry. You're drawn to character. You're not impressed by attention, you seek alignment. You no longer engage with women who disappear. You engage with those who stay steady, who respect your time, your standards, your presence. Because now, your presence has weight. Your silence has volume. And your energy? It's no longer free. It's earned. This level of detachment isn't just about romantic relationships. It becomes a lens through which you see life. You stop overreacting to bad days. You stop needing everything to go your way. You start choosing your response instead of being ruled by your emotions. That's the essence of Stoicism, not controlling the world, but mastering how you move through it. You don't fear loss. You face it. You don't chase closure. You create it. You don't beg for validation. You embody it. And from that posture, your life begins to transform. You're no longer living in reaction to her silence. You're living in service to your vision. You detach from who you were when she left, and you don't look back. You're too busy building. Too focused to be distracted. Too dialed in to spiral. And every day you remain silent, focused, consistent, you grow more powerful. Not in noise, but in stillness. Not in rage, but in rhythm. That's how warriors move. That's how legends are made. She expected heartbreak. What she triggered was hunger. She expected you to fall apart. What she witnessed, if only from a distance, was your rise. Because the old you would have collapsed. The new you? He's composed. She ghosted you expecting silence to break you. Instead, it built you. Because you used that silence as structure. You didn't lash out. You didn't reach out. You rebuilt. And now look at you. Unbothered. Unavailable. Unmatched. Not because you're pretending, but because you've truly leveled up. Her access is gone. Your standards are higher. Your world is tighter. And your energy is sacred. Detachment didn't dull your feelings, it refined them. It taught you where to place your care, where to invest your time. Who gets your vulnerability? Who earns your presence? And that filter? It changes everything. So if you're feeling this right now, if you've felt the shift from needy to neutral, from reaction to reinvention, then you know what's happening. You're not just healing. You're hardening in the right places. You're not just letting go. You're locking in. You've stopped chasing. And that, my friend, is the moment you become magnetic. You don't need to be seen anymore. You are seen by the man you see in the mirror. And if this part of the journey lit a fire inside you, if you're done being the man who overextends and ready to become the man who moves in silence, hit that like button and comment, number 1, to claim your shift. Don't forget to subscribe, because this evolution isn't over. We've still got more ground to rise through. Your power is only getting started. Let's keep going. 5. Reinvention became the response. There comes a moment when you stop wondering what she's doing. When you stop checking if she saw your story. When her name stops triggering that pulse in your chest. That moment is not an accident. It's the result of something deeper, something you chose, consciously or not, reinvention. You didn't beg. You didn't break down. You didn't launch into long speeches about how much she hurt you. You did something far more powerful. You went quiet, and you got to work. While she waited for a reaction, you built a response she'd never be ready for. A new version of you. One forged not in fantasy, but in discipline. In silence. In solitude. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge is reactive. What you're doing now, that's recalibration. You took the parts of yourself that were stretched too thin, too dependent, too available, and you pulled them back into alignment. Your morning routine changed. Your focus shifted. You found parts of yourself that had been buried under validation seeking and overgiving. You stopped trying to prove your worth to someone who walked away, and started proving it to yourself. And that's what most people miss. They think reinvention is aesthetic. That it's new clothes, new gym selfies, new captions. But true reinvention is internal. It's invisible at first. It starts when you finally stop talking about what she did and start asking, "What can I do now that I couldn't before?" You see, her leaving didn't end you. It freed you. It cut the cord that was tying your growth to her comfort. It stripped away the illusion of permanence. And in that space, you realize something crucial. No one is coming to save you. No one owes you healing. No one can rebuild you but you. So you went inward. And there, you found what she never gave you, stability. Not in the form of reassurance or affection, but in routine. In repetition. In showing up for yourself every single day, even when you didn't feel like it. That's where the new version of you was born, not in a dramatic moment, but in the quiet ones. When you chose to train instead of text. When you chose to reflect instead of react. When you chose silence not because you were lost, but because you were focused. That's what reinvention really looks like, small, unsexy, consistent actions that no one claps for, but that stack into something undeniable. You didn't transform to get her back. You transformed so that even you wouldn't recognize the man who got ghosted. Because that version of you? He was a step in your story, not the ending. He had to be left behind. He was the man who tolerated uncertainty, who gave more than he received, who hoped instead of acted. And while there's no shame in being that man, there's no reason to stay him. Your story doesn't need you to be soft. It needs you to be sharp. It needs you to stop building bridges toward people who burn them. Reinvention is the decision to build something permanent from the wreckage they left behind. And that doesn't mean you've gone cold. You still feel. You still reflect. You still care. But now, you care in the right direction. You care more about your mission than her message. More about your habits than her history. You understand that attention is cheap, but discipline? That's wealth. That's security. That's legacy. And that shift, from reactive emotion to structured execution, is what elevates you from a man recovering to a man becoming. You don't post about it. You don't preach about it. You live it. The changes start showing in your walk, your tone, your patience, your posture. People notice. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because when a man reinvents from the inside out, the world can't help but feel it. You've grown quieter, but your presence got louder. You've grown calmer, but your goals got clearer. This is the energy of a man who is no longer at war with the past. He's in partnership with his future. And that future? It's not built on trying to be seen. It's built on becoming undeniable. You now move with a different kind of urgency, not the panic of needing her back, but the fire of never needing anyone like that again. You've outgrown waiting. You've outgrown confusion. You've outgrown living in limbo. Your time is now invested in momentum. Not as a mask, not as a distraction, but as your new center of gravity. You wake up differently. You speak differently. You see opportunities where before you only saw reminders of her absence. That's the power of reinvention. It shifts not just your identity, but your awareness. And awareness is key, because you now understand what she was meant to teach you. Not how to get over someone, but how to get back to yourself. Not how to win someone back, but how to become someone who never loses himself again. This is the essence of Stoic relationships, not the absence of connection, but the clarity of choosing only those who match your rhythm. You no longer chase emotional highs. You seek alignment, consistency, growth. Your heart may still be open, but now, it's guarded by purpose. You've learned to build a routine that honors your goals, not your grief. You've replaced longing with lifting, overthinking with output. You go to bed exhausted, not from emotional loops, but from actual progress. You sleep better. You breathe deeper. You're not escaping pain, you've simply stopped worshipping it. That's reinvention, when pain becomes part of your structure, not your identity. And yes, it took her absence to get here. But you no longer need to thank her. Because this isn't about her anymore. It never really was. She was the spark. You're the fire. She was the break. You're the rebuild. She may have been the first chapter in your transformation, but you're the author now. You hold the pen. And the man you're becoming, the one shaped by solitude, focused by fire, refined by rejection, that man is rare. And rarity doesn't scream. It doesn't chase. It doesn't ask for recognition. It becomes the standard. The example. The energy shift that changes every room it walks into. You're not just someone's ex. You're not a what if. You're not a remember when. You're a man becoming something she never saw coming, because she never looked past the surface. But now, the surface is just the beginning. Underneath? Precision. Discipline. Stillness. Strength. The architecture of a man who used silence as soil. And that's the truth of this chapter. Reinvention is not loud. It's not viral. It doesn't need to be flashy to be felt. It's private. Ruthless. Unapologetic. It's not a glow-up for the gram. It's a restructuring of the soul. It's taking every weakness she exposed and forging it into something untouchable. You're not afraid of being left anymore. Because you're no longer waiting to be found. You've found yourself. And that's not a line, that's the foundation. So now, you walk differently. You move with depth. You protect your energy. You've built a system where chaos can't survive. And even if no one claps, even if no one posts about your journey, you feel it. You've changed. You've built a life from your pain. And that's not just healing. That's legend. 6. Indifference is irresistible. There's something she never calculated. Something she didn't see coming when she ghosted you, when she disappeared without warning, when she assumed your silence meant devastation. She expected tears. She expected texts. She expected you to fall apart. But what she got instead was indifference. Not the fake kind. Not the passive-aggressive. I'll pretend I don't care. Kind. No, this was the kind born from fire, from discipline, from detachment so clean it couldn't be faked. And that's what flipped everything. Because indifference, when it's real, is magnetic. It shakes the ground under people who once believed they owned space in your mind. When you stop reacting, not as a strategy, but as a reflection of true inner calm, it creates a vacuum. A mystery. And in that mystery, they start to feel what you once felt. The uncertainty. The unavailability. The weight of not knowing. But here's the difference. You don't do it to get that reaction. You do it because you've finally learned to care about the right things. And that shift? It's rare. It's stoic. Stoicism teaches you to focus on what you control, and you can't control her silence. You can't control her choices. But you can control your response. And when that response is indifference, you reclaim everything. You reclaim time. You reclaim energy. You reclaim your narrative. You are no longer defined by who leaves or who stays. You're defined by who you become. And the man you're becoming now, he doesn't flinch. He doesn't wait. He doesn't wonder. He builds. Indifference isn't a rejection of feeling. It's the highest form of self-respect. It's the voice inside that says, I no longer place my peace in your hands. It's the mental clarity that sees attention for what it is, a currency too valuable to spend on someone who vanished when things got real. It's the emotional strength that doesn't need revenge, doesn't need closure, doesn't need an audience. It just moves. Smooth. Steady. Sovereign. And that movement, that's what she didn't anticipate. She thought you'd stall. She thought you'd linger. But when you replaced desire with direction, affection with ambition, something shifted. She used to know your rhythm. Now she doesn't even know your frequency. She can't read you anymore. And unpredictability, especially from a man who once gave everything, is powerful. It makes her question what she once took for granted. It makes her wonder, did I ever really have him? That's what true indifference creates. Not cruelty, but curiosity. Not pain, but presence. She begins to realize that your calm isn't emptiness, it's discipline. Your distance isn't pettiness, it's progress. And your silence isn't confusion, it's clarity. She ghosted the version of you who once needed validation. But you've become the version who creates his own. You no longer measure your value by how people treat you. You measure it by how well you uphold your code. That's Stoicism in practice. That's Stoic Relationships in motion. You stop chasing what leaves and start attracting what aligns. You stop trying to prove you're worthy and start living like it's already true. And in doing so, you become rare. Because most people? They're addicted to reactions. They need feedback to feel alive. But not you. You've trained yourself in the silence. You've forged a new identity in the dark. You don't need to be seen anymore. You've stopped performing for attention. And when that need dies, something more powerful takes its place: self-certainty. She might try to reconnect. Float a message. Like a post. Ask a mutual. But by then, the window has closed, not with bitterness, but with balance. You're not the same man she left. You're not even in the same world. Because indifference doesn't just protect your energy. It rewrites your value. It moves you from being an option in someone else's world to becoming the center of your own. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first. Indifference requires a death of ego. It requires letting go of the fantasy that they'll come back, that they'll explain, that they'll make it make sense. It demands that you stop playing the game completely, not to win, but to build something beyond the game. That's why it's so rare. And that's why it's irresistible. You've reached the point now where her opinion no longer holds weight. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about your mission more. You replaced distraction with direction. You traded fantasy for focus. And now, you're unavailable to what once consumed you. You're building, training, working, sharpening. You've stopped looking back, not because you don't remember, but because the man in the mirror demands all of you now. She may feel your shift. She may notice the absence of emotion where there used to be fire. But what she'll never feel again is your access. Because you've mastered something deeper than control. You've mastered clarity. You know now that attention isn't affection. That proximity isn't loyalty. That presence without consistency is manipulation. You've stopped settling for what sparkles. You're looking for what builds. And that's not something you'll ever find in someone who leaves without a word. This level of indifference, it doesn't make you unfeeling. It makes you unstoppable. You're no longer hoping. You're no longer guessing. You're executing. And that execution? It's quiet. It's disciplined. It's surgical. That's why it hits differently. Because people are used to emotional chaos. You've become emotional clarity. That clarity cuts. It confuses. It captivates. You've become the man who doesn't chase, not because he can't, but because he doesn't need to. You've outgrown the validation loop. You've stopped trying to be chosen. You're choosing yourself, every day, in every action, with every step. That's what makes indifference powerful. It doesn't look like power until you see who it makes uncomfortable. And if she's watching, let her. Let her wonder. Let her regret. Let her sit with the silence she created, while you sit in the stillness you cultivated. You don't owe her chaos. You don't owe her a response. You owe yourself growth. You owe yourself peace. You owe yourself the kind of evolution that turns heartbreak into horsepower. Because in the end, it was never about proving her wrong. It was about proving to yourself what you were always capable of. That even in the absence of love, you could be driven. That even after the deepest pain, you could rise. That even in the quietest nights, you could build the loudest legacy. That's what indifference gave you, the space to become unforgettable. And if this resonates, if you've felt that shift, if you've moved from reaction to revolution, then take a moment. Like this video and comment, number 1, to mark your rise. And subscribe, because what comes next? It's only getting better. You're not finished. You're just beginning. Let's keep building. So here we are. You've made it through the fire. Through the silence, through the ache, through the chapters that stripped you down to the bone and made you question everything. Not just about her, but about yourself. And now you're standing in a new space. Not a clean, polished space. No, this place still carries echoes of what you lost. But it's stronger. Sharper. It's yours. And that's something no one can take. Because let's be honest, when you were ghosted, you didn't just lose a connection. You lost an illusion. The illusion that someone else could complete you. The illusion that your worth was measured by someone staying. You lost the version of you that overreached, overgave, and overexplained. That version died in the silence. And that's exactly why this isn't a sad ending. It's a rite of passage. A necessary ego death. A shedding of who you thought you needed to be in order to be loved. What you gained was clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes when everything falls apart. Because pain has a way of revealing things comfort never will. In heartbreak, you met your shadow. In stillness, you met your potential. And now, as you walk forward, you're carrying something far more powerful than love. You're carrying self-respect. That doesn't mean you're hardened. It means you're refined. It means you've stopped giving away parts of yourself just to be seen. You've stopped chasing ghosts. You've stopped waiting for explanations. You've stopped trying to reverse a decision that was never in your control to begin with. That's a level of maturity most men never reach, not because they're weak, but because they're conditioned to tie their identity to being wanted. But you cut the cord. You took the silence and didn't fill it with noise. You filled it with effort, with purpose, with transformation. And that's the rarest response of all. You've become someone that the world doesn't see every day. Not because you're loud, but because you're centered. You no longer need to announce your growth. It speaks through how you carry yourself. Through how you protect your peace. Through how you choose who gets your energy. And that energy? It's not for everyone anymore. Because you've learned the most expensive thing you can give someone isn't your money. It's your time. Your attention. Your access. And the next time someone tries to step into your life, they'll meet the version of you who doesn't flinch. Who doesn't rush. Who doesn't fold for temporary closeness. They'll meet a man with a code. A man shaped by silence and sharpened by solitude. A man who doesn't settle for potential. Who doesn't romanticize inconsistency. Who chooses presence. Who values discipline. Who lives not by emotion, but by principle. That's the essence of Stoic relationships. They aren't built on highs. They're built on harmony. On shared values. On the quiet confidence that says, I know who I am. And I will never lose myself for love again. That kind of connection doesn't spark chaos. It brings calm. It doesn't ask you to shrink, it meets you at your level. And because you've done the work, you'll recognize it. You won't be fooled by charm. You'll look deeper. You'll listen slower. You'll choose smarter. The journey here wasn't easy. It required 1,000 little decisions. To hold the line when you wanted to break. To stay silent when your ego screamed for revenge. To choose growth when going numb would have been easier. But you did it. Not all at once, but day by day, one choice after another. And now, those choices have compounded into character, into a foundation no storm can shake. This is what it means to rise into Stoicism. Not that you never feel, but that you never falter. That your peace becomes priority. That your mission becomes magnetic. You are no longer defined by what left. You are defined by what remains. The man in the mirror. The one who rebuilt. The one who no longer asks for love, he attracts it by the way he lives. She may never know what she walked away from. Or maybe one day she will. Maybe she'll look you up. See your name. Watch your growth from a distance. She'll remember what it felt like to be seen by you. To be held in your focus. And she'll realize something simple and brutal. She vanished before the legend began. And that's not your burden. That's her memory to carry. You don't chase it. You don't resent it. You let it be. Because now you're too grounded to grasp at what couldn't stay. Your attention is sacred now. Your heart is earned, not offered. Your time is invested, not given. And what you build next, it won't be for validation. It'll be for legacy. For impact. For a life lived on your terms, not shaped by someone else's confusion. You've taken rejection and made it a ritual. You've taken heartbreak and made it your holy ground. You've taken the silence and used it as signal. Signal that your life is not a reaction anymore. It's a rhythm. A movement. A storm moving inward, not to destroy, but to rebuild everything that matters. And everything that doesn't? It gets left behind. Because your evolution is sacred. It's deliberate. And no one who vanished deserves to return and interrupt that. So now you walk forward, not as the man she left, but as the man who rose because of it. You don't need to be remembered. You've become unforgettable. You don't need to prove you're rare. You live like you are. That is the real transformation. That is what Stoicism delivers, not numbness, but nobility. Not detachment, but direction. Not coldness, but calm so deep that it burns hotter than chaos ever could. You've mastered the hardest lesson of all. Peace doesn't come from getting them back. It comes from never needing them again. You've outgrown the boy who begged for answers. You've become the man who moves without permission. And that kind of man, he doesn't fear loss. He welcomes it. Because anything that leaves your life and leaves you stronger was never a loss. It was a lesson. Walk on. No more what ifs. No more someday. Just forward. Grounded. Stoic. Unshakable.